Running training sessions over Zoom is very, very difficult. You can't always judge the room, people are in different locations, and ultimately you're relying on them to give you their full attention and contribute and listen. We're going to go through a couple of psychological techniques that we can use to make sure people are engaged and listening and contributing to your Zoom training sessions. The strength of a really good Zoom training session is in the agenda and the way that you actually set the tone of the training itself. So the slide that you see on your screen now is typically how I start all of my Zoom training sessions, whether that's sales training, leadership training, or even coaching for that matter. Now, what we're trying to convey here is the atmosphere we're trying to create. And it's important that we set that tone nice and early. But there's a couple of little psychological techniques in here that are going to make sure that people are enthused and engaged in what we're doing. So we talk about these three zones: the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the panic zone. Now, the comfort zone is where someone is doing stuff that they usually do. They're not feeling particularly challenged and it's really easy for them. The learning zone is where they're being stretched, where it's a bit uncomfortable. It might be a bit embarrassing. They might make some mistakes. And ultimately, they're going to be stretched and challenged. And lastly, there's the panic zone, where they're deeply uncomfortable, anxious, sweaty palms, etc., etc. We make it clear that the one we're trying to achieve is the learning zone. The analogy I always use is juggling. If I came into the training session and said that you're going to learn how to catch a ball, that would be really, really easy. Anyone in the world can do that within a couple of seconds. However, if I brought 3 balls in here, said that you're going to learn how to juggle, that's where it gets uncomfortable. You're going to spill the balls on the floor, you're going to embarrass yourself in front of your colleagues, you're going to pick up new skills, you're going to have to really think about things, you're going to have to engage in the task, and it's going to be a little bit challenging and a little bit scary. Now lastly, if I brought 3 chainsaws in here and said you're going to learn how to juggle chainsaws, that's where we'd achieve panic zone, where you wouldn't want to be in the room, sweaty palms, anxious, don't want to get involved. The first one we do not want to achieve, comfort zone, too easy, no real learning. The last one we certainly don't want to achieve, panic zone, too anxious, no learning can take place. But that learning zone is key, because that's where we sort of stretch and challenge. Now, the reason I go through this slide is because I want to let them know that it is going to be a bit uncomfortable. And when you set that tone, often you get engagement and often you get people willing to participate. And that's really, really important. Pose, pause, pounce is a really interesting psychological mechanism to make sure that everyone is listening to the training, but more importantly, they're participating in that training as well. It's a very simple format. What we do is we ask a question, we stop, and then we pick someone very, very quickly. So it goes something like this. So what are the 3 reasons that we ask open questions? Sarah. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, first of all, everyone else who's not been asked the question sits back and thinks, okay, that could be me at some point, so I better pay attention. And the person who's been asked the question, they now have to engage really, really quickly and prove that they've been listening. Now, the reason this is so useful is because when you use it very early on, again, you set the tone that people will be asked to participate and you will be bringing them in, asking them questions. And all of a sudden, people stop playing on their Angry Birds or, sending an email on their other screen, and they're concentrating to what you say. That's pose, pause, pounce. Pose the question, pause, and then pick someone to ask that question on. So again, it will go something like this. So why is it so important that we use pose, pause, pounce? John. If pose, pause, pounce is the stick, then rewarding contribution is definitely the carrot. This was something that I learned very early in my training career, and it's been incredibly useful, but also incredibly useful over Zoom. When someone gives you contribution or gives you early contribution, really reward them for that contribution. So someone might answer a question or give a piece of insight or even comment on something you've said. Take the time to pause and go, that was really, really good. Excellent contribution. Guys, that's exactly what we want to see from the session today. I've even gone as far as saying, Sarah, you're now my favourite. The rest of you are going to have to work really hard to dislodge Sarah from that top spot. And again, you're creating an environment of rewarding people for contributing. Now, there may be a situation where they give the wrong contribution, in which case you don't reward them for the answer, you reward them for the bravery and the courage and the insight of actually contributing. So it would go something like this. So Sarah, look, you're so close, you're not right there. We'll go through the answer in a moment or two, but thank you so much for the contribution. Really, really good of you to actually get the conversation started. And this is what we're expected to see today, guys. Not all the learning is going to come from me. A lot of it's going to come from you guys. So let's make sure that we're contributing and getting involved. And you're creating that environment where people want to contribute. They want to give their insight. And lastly, there's nothing wrong with facilitating a conversation in that process. If someone is happy to just give their insight and there's a couple of bits of learning that are valuable from someone else, we should be encouraging that. So there you go, guys. There's 3 top tips to making sure that your Zoom training sessions run smoothly with good audience participation, but more importantly, people are listening to the content that you're providing. If you've got any other tips, leave them in the comments. Feel free to share this with anyone else and remember to subscribe. And as always, guys, happy selling.